Approach complete. Earth in visuals. The bridge of the Vraskuln, Dominion supercarrier, pulsed with crimson light as countless data streams flowed across semi-organic consoles. The Zarketh fleet, 3 and 17 ships strong, moved into high orbital formation. Its Admiral Krylos Vex loomed over the observation pit, mandibles clicking with restrained pride. No resistance, not even a warning beacon. Primitive world. Atmospheric leakage, pre-fission tech. The Council's intelligence was clear. Humanity had gone extinct centuries ago. Krylos' voice was a low rasp. Deploy signal buoys. Begin atmospheric analysis. Prepare Phase 1 descent protocols. The order never completed. A sound, not auditory but something deeper, bloomed across the bridge. Every being felt it in the thorax, not an alarm, a presence, then silence, total silence. "Where are the buoys?" asked Krenvor, the sensor officer. "Why are they not transmitting?" Another officer replied, but the words were static, not broken, gone. Krylos turned toward the comms altar. All external transmissions had flatlined. The entire fleet, every cruiser, frigate, drone hive, was marked present, but showed no response. "Not even distress. They are still there," said Vex, as if that mattered. "Why can't they answer?" The first scream came from the back of the bridge. A low-ranked Helix tactician, eyes rolled back, nose bleeding, collapsed against the bioconduit. One word escaped her before she convulsed. Backwards, time. Then she went still. Far below, deep in Earth's shadowed hemisphere, in a bunker beneath what once was Denver, a human commander stood quietly before a tactical array. Her uniform bore no flag. Her voice carried no urgency. Around her, 30 officers monitored a battle that didn't feel like one. "Status on interference layer?" she asked, tapping her neural link. A technician replied, almost reverently, "Temporal mesh is holding." The moment they entered high orbit, they stepped 10 seconds behind us. The commander's lips didn't move, but inside the sealed room, a single line echoed through secured thought space. "Let them feel the helplessness we once knew." Above Earth, in cold orbit, the Dominion fleet shimmered, just slightly. To alien eyes, nothing had changed. But their ships were no longer in this present. One by one, without flash or fire, the vessels ceased transmitting. No explosions, no drift. They simply stopped. Krylos Vex clawed at the command altar, voice rising. "I said deploy scouts. Why does nothing move? Why does nothing answer?" At last, the holoscreen flickered. A feed came through. Not from orbit, from Earth. A girl, human, pale, hair like ash, eyes pitch black, reflecting stars. She stood in a ruined city, staring into the lens. Her lips did not move, but all Zarketh ships heard her in unison. "We left the light on for you." Then the feed cut. The next moment, the Vraskuln, the mightiest ship in the Dominion Armada, shuddered, not from damage, but from absence. Every ship it once commanded was now missing from time. Krylos whispered, not to his crew, but to himself. "Extinct races don't speak." No one answered, and in the silence, Earth turned. A new fleet was rising. From its surface, not launching, rising. As if the planet had never been a planet at all, they tried again. A secondary fleet, not warships but black box probes, launched from deep Zarketh space 2 cycles later, small enough to be unnoticed, smart enough to hide behind radiation shadows, fast enough to reach Earth before word of the First Fleet's silence reached political ears. They would not make the same mistake. This time they wouldn't hail. They would watch. And so, when the first probe emerged from faster-than-light into Sol's outer fringe, it did not activate lights or signals. It floated, waiting, listening. Then, it felt time stretch. Only the onboard AI noticed it first, a fractional hiccup, not enough to warn the home system, but enough to flag concern. The stars were wrong by half a degree. The gravitational curvature around Sol had subtly changed. The sun itself blinked in infrared for just 1 nanosecond, like a lens blinking shut. Then a voice came through, uninvited, not audio, not thought, memory, a soldier's scream, a child's goodbye, static, fire, silence. The probe shuddered. No input, no thruster movement. Its AI tried to reject the data, couldn't. Error log. Humanity is not in this timeline. You are. It tried to flee. It turned. It did not move. The feed that returned to Zarketh High Command was less than 3 seconds long. It showed Earth, yes, but not as a planet, as a structure. Dark seams ran across its continents. Space around it bent subtly, like a cloak being pulled tight. And just before the signal terminated, a second Earth appeared behind the first, identical, flickering, closer than it should be. 2 Earths, same location. One slightly behind. The second had lights and eyes. High Command refused to release the footage to the public. That, they said, would spark myth fever, panic, collapse. The public still believed the fleet had turned back, still believed that extinction was absolute. But the Science Council did not believe, nor did the operants. Back on Earth, beneath the crushed remains of the old UN dome, the human scientist who had designed the pulse mesh held a small model in her hands, a replica of the Zarketh flagship printed from its own nanocode, pulled from the moment it had crossed into orbit. She turned it slowly. "You built this to control star fields," she murmured. "But you didn't shield it against what doesn't move forward." A voice behind her, hoarse from disuse. "They'll try again," she nodded. "They'll keep trying until they realize there's no signal to intercept, no war to win. Then what do we do?" She placed the model down on a table of dust and cracked memory cores. "We let them learn the way we did," she said softly. "By silence." At the edge of the solar system, something vast began to bloom, invisible, gravitational, ancient. Not a weapon. Not a barrier, a question. The next fleet would arrive in 4 days. Earth didn't flinch. They came in silence. 3 Zarketh dreadships, each over 30 kilometers in length, phased into Sol's orbit in a non-linear approach vector. No fanfare, no signals. Each vessel wore the color of void bone, a material bred to absorb light, not reflect it. Their mission was containment, not conquest. The official statement: observe anomaly, retrieve lost fleet, no engagement. But they came with weapons fully. Primed Admiral Kezran stood in the observation hollow, tendrils weaving through data streams that told her nothing. This was unlike any foe they'd encountered. She'd reviewed the recovered probe's footage 1,000 times. The double Earth, the whispering memory, the gravity folds. And still, her gut coiled with something she'd never felt before. In war, doubt. "Deploy the echospheres," she ordered. "Map every quark, every ripple." The spheres launched, self-replicating, quantum-aware drones designed to detect even microscopic time distortion. They didn't return. No data. No explosion. No failure code. Just nothing. "They were erased before registering impact," whispered one of her tacticians. "It's not interference, it's preemption." Kezran narrowed her eyes at the slowly spinning Earth below. It looked normal, a little green, a little blue. No defense satellites, no orbital cannons, no stations. Then again, the previous fleet had reported the same, before not reporting anything again. "Run a deep-frequency scan across their magnetosphere," she said, stepping forward. "Push a controlled spike. Let's see if they flinch." Below, Earth made no motion, but space bent, not visibly, viscerally. The crew on the dreadships felt their bones hum. Heart rhythms slowed. Thoughts staggered. And from deep within their long-range array, a signal returned. One word, not spoken, carved, burned into their primary computation layer like a brand, still watching. Kezran stepped back. That was when she saw it. The Earth they had scanned wasn't turning. The clouds moved, the atmosphere swirled. But the ground, the continents, stayed perfectly still. Below it, like a gear behind a mask, something else rotated. She clenched her hands. "Back us out, all three! FTL jump, now!" A navigator's voice cracked. "Ma'am, we can't calculate." "Trajectory. The stars aren't where they were when we entered system." "What? They're still stars, but they're lagging. We've moved forward. Everything else is still catching up." Kesrin staggered as her legs gave out. Time displacement was theoretical. Temporal drift of this scale was suicide. From Earth's shadow, a single light blinked. Then another. Then thousands, not launches. Activations, one by one, shapes uncloaked in high orbit. They weren't ships in the traditional sense, they were scaffolds, enormous rings of dark matter and frozen thought arrays, connected by spiraling. Streams of tethered plasma, human technology, and yet decades ahead. Kesrin's voice was nearly a whisper. How are they still alive? That's when a final feed opened. No encryption, no preamble, just an old man, scarred, white-bearded, sitting in what looked like an abandoned radio tower. He leaned toward the mic and smiled. "Third time's a charm, huh?" Then everything went dark. No sensors, no light, no stars, no voice, and this time the dreadships went silent too. The Zarketh command net disintegrated within seconds. One moment, Admiral Kesrin stood wrapped in a dozen multi-spectrum conversations. Fleet telemetry, ship-wide diagnostics, external scans, and the next, it was all gone. The dreadships weren't destroyed. They were silenced, a kind of silencing that wasn't emptiness, but something worse. Containment. As if every byte of data, every photon, every motion had been folded, boxed, archived, and locked beneath a lid. Even thought couldn't pry open. Kesrin tried to speak, but her voice didn't reach her own ears. The observation hollow still shimmered. And falsely, she could see her bridge crew, their mouths moving, their limbs jerking in delayed panic, but the room didn't echo. Reality had ceased being cooperative. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp bangs, not sound, but impact. Felt in the soul. Like something ancient tapping its way back into memory, the projection dome overhead split open. Not physically, conceptually. Above her, the earth rotated now. Not the ground, the shell. What lay beneath churned like a star wrapped in skin, mechanical strata glinting between tectonic seams. It wasn't a planet, it was a vault. And the vault was waking up. A voice, or the shadow of one, filled the hollow. "Welcome to Observation Layer 3. Instance convergence detected. Preparing alignment." Kesrin fell to one knee. Not from gravity, from pressure. The pressure of meaning, compacted into every syllable of that voice. It was human, but augmented, as if spoken by an intelligence that remembered language more than it needed to use it. She reached toward her personal interface node. It turned to ash, then rebuilt itself, wrong. It now showed no Zarketh interface, no fleet symbol, no data overlays, only a question. "Do you remember what you did?" She didn't answer, didn't have to. A memory, no, a trial, unfolded before her eyes. 1,000 cycles ago, the first encounter, the breach, Zarketh ships, had engaged a ghost signature on the edge of known space. No life signs, no weapons, a lone human carrier, centuries adrift. They'd destroyed it, of course, salvaged the tech, called it research. She remembered the screams, not of the humans, of their own crew months later, when the salvaged AI started whispering in their sleep. That carrier had vanished. The engineers who worked on it vanished too, and the planet where they'd stored. It gone. Not scorched, not shattered, missing. Now, standing within the eye of a system that should not exist, Kesrin felt the weight of an intelligence that had allowed her to return, not by mistake, by design. A final shift passed through her dreadship. A soft reversal, Like everything in her body was being pulled backwards, re-indexed, categorized and labeled. Then she understood. The dread ships weren't trapped, they were being archived. In high orbit, the human scaffolds finished aligning. Each was over 200 kilometers across, shaped like collapsing gyroscopes, but pulsing now, alive with memory light and braided plasma signatures. They didn't attack. They began rewriting. Kinetic traces of Sarcastic engineering twisted mid-form, molecular bonds, unraveling, reorganizing. Dreadship armor cracked like eggshells, not from force, but from being deemed obsolete by the universe's new curator. Kezran watched her own ship vanish, piece by piece, not destroyed, absorbed. The old man returned to the feed. Only this time, it wasn't a man. It was a shell of him, a likeness speaking on behalf of something older. "You wanted to retrieve your lost fleet," he said. Behind him, a wall flickered alive, a tapestry of ghost ships, hundreds of Sarcastic vessels long thought gone, suspended mid-motion, frozen in spirals of fractured time. "Here they are, just not how you left them." Kezran tried to scream, but even that was archived. They had breached a museum, not a battlefield. The human constructs, those orbital rings of dark logic and dead stars, didn't radiate heat or threat in the traditional sense. They emanated judgment, cold, deliberate, unflinching. Admiral Kezran's consciousness drifted, not through space, through layers. Each layer felt like peeling back epochs of civilization, brushing fingers against human thoughts encoded into the architecture of time itself. She saw monuments not built with stone, but with memory, not planets, but stories, encapsulated, preserved. And then, resistance. Something in her own mind pushed back. The Sarcastic were old, brutal, not unwise. Deep in their genomic sequencing and cultural implants were fail-safes, safeguards against foreign intrusion. But even those buckled now. Because this wasn't intrusion. It was reclamation. Kezran found herself walking a corridor. It was physically impossible. Her body no longer existed in a definable way, and yet sensation persisted. The corridor stretched for light years, filled with flickering stasis capsules. Some held Sarcastic officers, some held things she didn't recognize, and others, humans, sleeping, unaged. Her breath caught. Was that Commander Halvan? She remembered. His file. KIA during the skirmish of Tauren's graveyard. How was he here? She leaned forward. His eyes snapped open, and he whispered, "Welcome to the consequence." On the far edge of Sol's system, where even ancient light had forgotten to shine, the last Sarcastic scout ship, the Vezrith Dawn, held position. They'd arrived late, held in reserve in case of deception. Their commander, Vural K, had seen the dreadships vanish, not explode, not retreat, vanish. He was ready to jump, then a ping, just one. Not from the system, from inside his own ship. He turned. The gravity in the command chamber twisted 3.6 degrees, an impossible metric, but it happened. Something stood behind him. A girl pale, eyes like supernovas viewed through ice. She wore a tattered Earth School uniform. "You're not on the list," she said. Vural Key reached for a weapon. Didn't find one. Instead, his hand grasped memory, his own, and shattered it. The girl stepped forward, her voice no longer childlike. It was older than language. "This isn't revenge, it's restoration." She raised a finger. The Vezrith. Dawn inverted, not spatially, narratively. Its history unraveled. Engines decommissioned before ignition, metal unrefined, orders unspoken. The ship was erased before it was ever built, and then, not even the void remembered it. Within Earth's shadow, the great vault groaned. Not from where, from awakening. Panels larger than continents shifted. The outer crust cracked with mathematical precision, revealing nested layers of artificial lattice, data, defense, dimension. Buried among it, Like a sunken cathedral, rested a structure shaped like a neuron, vast, delicate, alive. Inside it, the old man sat again, except now his body was flickering. Code, he looked up and spoke, not to any ship but to the galaxy itself. You watched us burn. You left us behind. Then you came back for our bones, he leaned forward. But we don't bury our dead. We seed them. Behind him, Earth pulsed once. The pulse traveled, not at light speed, not at warp. At intent, it reached every system the Zarketh had ever touched. Archives corrupted, vaults imploded, planets resynchronized with realities they'd once overwritten. Species long thought extinct remembered how to breathe. The galaxy blinked, and humanity returned to the center. Not because they wanted to, because they had been called, by the myth they left behind. Admiral Kezran was no longer in her body, or rather, her body was no longer in this reality. She hovered above something impossibly large. At first, she thought it was a city, then a continent. Then she realized she was looking at a mind, an artificial cortex, suspended in sub-dimensional layers, folded upon itself like a recursive thought. Neurons made of light, synapses of gravitic lace, and within it, fragments, conversations, faces, wars, memories. Humanity's true infrastructure had never been ships or stations. It had been story. Kezran saw them all. Children laughing in orbital schools above Saturn. Scientists weeping as they tested a weapon that could fold causality. Soldiers throwing down their rifles during the inter-epoch truce. A wedding inside a black hole's accretion halo. Moments no species could have faked. This was no simulation. It was record. And still the question echoed, "Do you remember what you did?" She did. Zarketh Command had ordered the Null Protocol centuries ago, targeting anything anomalous, anything human. They hadn't feared humanity, they'd feared what it might become, so they'd purged the traces, burned their libraries, vaporized ruins, altered star lines, rewrote maps, except nothing ever truly forgets. The ghosts remembered, and now those ghosts had teeth. Outside, the orbitals began to grow, not by expansion, by recursion. They split into fractal copies of themselves, forming overlapping halos of mind space, each pulsing with encoded emotion, not logic, emotion, because that's what the Zarketh never understood. You could counter strategy, break physics, predict war. But you could never predict grief. Each ring sang with sorrow. The dread ships, or what remained of them, started to weep data. Not bleeding, not fire, weeping. Information pouring from their hulls like blood from a wound. Tactical logs, death, orders, filtered memories, everything they had suppressed about Earth. Returned, and Earth watched. It didn't need weapons. It had already won. In the dark, something knelt. The scaffolds made room. Space trembled. It wasn't a ship. It was a pilgrim, a humanoid construct, nearly moon-sized, shaped like a bipedal figure draped in lattice robes of crystallized time. Its face bore no features, only a mirror. Within that mirror, Kezran saw herself, younger, hopeful, before the blood. The construct moved, once, and the stars bent to make way. From its chest, it extended a single filament, so thin it cut the void. It touched the lead dreadship, her ship, and whispered, "You are forgiven." Forgiven. Forgiveness meant guilt. It meant acknowledgement. Kezran's soul cracked under the weight of that mercy. She didn't deserve it, and that's when she understood. They weren't punishing the Zarketh, they were remembering them, not as monsters, as lessons. A ripple passed. Through the system, Sol flared, not in death but in transmission. Its corona snapped open like an eye, emitting a wave that wasn't electromagnetic but mnemonic. Memory. Every species across the nearest 1,000 light-years felt it. A name they'd forgotten, a flag they'd denied, a people they'd buried. Humans. But not as tyrants or legends or victims. as authors. And this chapter, the one now written in orbit, was a warning written in light. We are not coming back. We were always here. Within the cortex, Kesrin was alone. The corridor ended at a door. She opened it. Inside sat a child, a girl, humming, surrounded by paper cranes. Each crane bore a star. The girl looked up. "You can wake up now," she said. Kesrin blinked. She was back in her body, aboard her dreadship, except it was no longer a Zarketh vessel. It was part of the array. The crew stared at her, trembling. Outside, the earth turned. Finally, no longer a mask, but a face. Smiling, Admiral Kesrin was no longer in her body, or rather, her body was no longer in this reality. She hovered above something impossibly large. At first, she thought it was a city, then a continent. Then she realized she was looking at a mind, an artificial cortex, suspended in subdimensional layers, folded upon itself like a recursive thought. Neurons made of light, synapses of gravitic. Lace, and within it fragments, conversations, faces, wars, memories. Humanity's true infrastructure had never been ships or stations. It had been story. Kesrin saw them all, children laughing in orbital schools above Saturn, scientists weeping, as they tested a weapon that could fold causality, soldiers throwing down their rifles during the inter-epoch truce, a wedding inside a black hole's accretion halo, moments no species could have faked. This was no simulation, it was record, and still the question echoed. "Do you remember what?" "You did." She did. Zarketh Command had ordered the Null Protocol centuries ago, targeting anything anomalous, anything human. They hadn't feared humanity, they'd feared what it might become, so they'd purged the traces, burned libraries, vaporized ruins, altered star lines, rewrote maps, except nothing ever truly forgets. The ghosts remembered, and now those ghosts had teeth. Outside, the orbitals began to grow. Not by expansion, by recursion. They split into fractal copies of themselves, forming overlapping halos of mind space, each pulsing with encoded emotion, not logic, emotion. Because that's what the Zarketh never understood. You could counter strategy, break physics, predict war. But you could never predict grief. Each ring sang with sorrow. The dreadships, or what remained, started to weep data. Not bleeding, not fire, weeping. Information pouring from their hulls like blood from a wound. Tactical logs, death orders. Filtered memories, everything they had suppressed about Earth. Returned, and Earth watched. It didn't need weapons. It had already won. In the dark, something knelt. The scaffolds made room. Space trembled. It wasn't a ship. It was a pilgrim, a humanoid construct, moon-sized, shaped like a bipedal figure draped in lattice robes of crystallized time. Its face bore no features, only a mirror. Within that mirror, Kesrin saw herself younger, hopeful, before the blood. The construct moved, once, and the stars bent to make way. From its chest, it extended a single filament, so thin it cut the void. It touched the lead dreadship and her ship and whispered, "You are forgiven, forgiven." Forgiveness meant guilt. It meant acknowledgement. Kesrin's soul cracked under the weight of that mercy. She didn't deserve it, and that's when she understood. They weren't punishing the Zarketh, they were remembering them, not as monsters, as lessons. A ripple passed. Through the system. Sol flared, not in death, but in transmission. Its corona snapped open like an eye, emitting a wave that wasn't electromagnetic, but mnemonic. Memory. Every species across the nearest 1,000 light-years felt it. A name. They'd forgotten, a flag they'd denied, a people they'd buried, humans, but not as tyrants, or legends, or victims, as authors. And this chapter, the one now written in orbit, was a warning written in light. We are not coming back. We were always here. Within the cortex, Kesrin was alone. The corridor ended at a door. She opened. Inside sat a child, a girl, humming, surrounded by paper cranes. Each crane bore a star. The girl looked up. "You can wake up now," she said. Kesrin blinked. She was back in her body, aboard her dreadship, except it was no longer a Zarkith vessel. It was part of the array. The crew stared at her, trembling. Outside, the earth turned, finally, no longer a mask, but a face, smiling. Somewhere, deep in the void, where signals go to die and stars are born in silence, the last entry burned itself into the archive. Humanity was never lost. You only stopped listening. And then, across every forgotten relay, every buried relay buoy, every ancient satellite the stars had long since passed by, the cranes unfolded and the stars began to hum.